We're in a season right now, and the season is called winter. We're going to get through this, but the better part is to look to take advantage of the time you're in. Because if you can do well when things are not looking up, when most people are being crushed, and that's what I want to work on with you today, if you can take control of the part you can control, what's going on in here and here, then you're going to have an extraordinary life no matter what happens on the outside, and you're going to have the energy to follow through and be able to do the things that are necessary to turn around the outside world. But in order to do that, you're going to have to deal with the emotions that come up, because the emotions that come up affect us. There was a lot of stress in all this. But when these things happen, we tend to go through a cycle of emotion. And I just want to remind you of it, because one of the ones that a lot of people dealt with was the sense of loss. And some people are still dealing with it. They may have lost a business, they may have lost a family member. I mean, there are all kinds of things that people have gone through. They lost a sense of freedom. So loss of any sort or a form of grief has a pattern. Whatever it is you don't like in your life, and anything it is you do like in your life, it's a pattern. You're not broken, but you might have some patterns that make you feel broken. You might have some patterns that keep you overweight, or you might have some patterns that make you frustrated, angry, and sad, when there are other patterns that'll make you feel grateful and excited and passionate. But when we think we are our patterns, it's hard to change. That pattern is something happens you're not ready for, and you have shock, and then out of that some confusion, some frustration, and some denial, like it can't be. That person couldn't have died. Oh, they couldn't possibly have locked me in my home for not 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but 6 months or a year or whatever the case may be. And you're kind of in denial, but that doesn't stop there. It goes to the next step. Go ahead and click it, and that is anger, or at least frustration or irritation or anxiety. It's like, no, this shouldn't have happened. No, someone is responsible for this. No, this is wrong. But of course, that doesn't free you. The anger doesn't free you. And then the next stage for people, some people, by the way, get stuck in shock and don't come out of it for a long time. Some get stuck in anger. And then eventually people get tired of being angry and they start to feel sadness or loss. And sometimes it goes into depression. And some people get stuck there. The next step out of that, moving up, is bargaining, where people get so depressed that they're like, okay, God, if you'll just do this, I'll do that. Or they bargain with themselves. Well, you know, I'll make myself do this if it means that. It's this way of trying to say there's got to be a better future. But eventually, the end of the normal stages is acceptance. It doesn't mean that you're happy about it. It just means it is what it is. You can't change what's happened, so now you need to focus on what you're going to do instead. But until you get to acceptance, there's this inner battle. And I think there's a sixth step if you want to have a healthy life. And the sixth step is create. You got to create something new. And that's really where we are right now after COVID. You got to create something new. You can't just do what you used to do because there's so much that's changed. But you can create something new. And creating something new is exciting for human beings. Our focus really is, this is going to be, okay, how do we get through this? And if you feel still pissed off or sad or, you know, bargaining, you can get to acceptance. There's a point you just got to say, okay, whether I like it or not, it happened. Now, what am I going to do about it? How am I going to shift things? And if we do that, we can change anything in our lives. But for me, the focus here in this program is to really get you to focus on what you can control. There's two worlds out there, right? There's the inside world and the external world. We can't control the external world. We can influence it. But we have total control if we learn how to take control of our inside world, our mind, our body, our emotions, our sense of connection. I was fed when I was a young man, and I never forgot it. And I fed when I turned 17, 2 families and 4, and then 8, and built to millions. And then I was writing Money Master the Game a few years back. And I was interviewing all the richest men and women in the world, people that started with nothing and became billionaires, all of them from scratch. And while I was doing that, I saw Congress cut the food stamps program. It's now called the SNAP program. And they cut it by $6 billion, which means every family needs food, literally has to give up a week's worth of food each month unless you and I step in. So we stepped in and we started this process, and I committed. I was like, How many people have I fed in my life? And I found it was 42 million people at that point. I was like, wow, that's amazing over a lifetime. And I was like, what if I fed 50 million people in a year? Have you ever gotten a goal that really excited you that seemed impossible, and then you got more excited about it, started to come together? And then I was like, well, what if I fed 100 million people in a year? What if I made 100 million people a year for 10 years and fed 1 billion people? So if you get caught up in a pattern, like, how do you get out of it? Well, you got to decide you're going to create. And I'll give you an example of why we get to be together today. You know, in my world, I have 105 companies. I'm very fortunate. I've built it up over decades. This is my 45th year doing this. Yeah, literally, I've been doing this my 45th year. It blows my mind. 45 years of serving people in 195 countries around the world. It's pretty amazing. And then, you know, while I have all these companies, I don't have to work. This is my mission. This is my calling, if you would. And so you can imagine when, you know, we had a birthday party for my 60th birthday party in 2020 in February, and we threw this big party, and, you know, I didn't want to party without a purpose, so we raised all this money for Underground Railroad, which is a group that saves kids that are, you know, locked down into slavery, basically. It's a horrific experience. And we raised $19 million that day, and I thought it was the greatest day of my life. And I was so excited. And, you know, 5 days later, I was going to do the seminar for, you know, 12,500 people up in San Jose, California. And then the governor made an announcement that only 10 people could be in a room together. It's like, what? That's right. You have to cancel your event. You can only have 10 people. And I was like, that's impossible. We can't do that. And I was like, fine, that doesn't matter. We're not gonna let this stop us. We'll move to Vegas. They'll never close Vegas, right? And we moved the dates, and guess what? They closed Vegas. Then I was like, fine, I'm gonna put this in 1,500 movie theaters with only 10 people each. They can go to their local movie theater, we'll broadcast it. They'll be on a giant screen. They'll have 10 other people, it'll still work. And then they shut down the movie theaters. And then I was like, fine, I'm gonna move the thing to Houston, Texas, because I have a friend with a church for 15,000 people. We'll fill that up. And I said, they're never gonna keep Costco open and shut down the churches. But they shut down the churches and they kept Costco open. So I tell you this because I had to create, because I was getting so frustrated, right? Because I really want to serve and I knew people needed us. And so then I went through the sadness and the bargaining and acceptance, and finally I had to create. And I was like, I watched somebody do a webinar with these two 52-inch screens, and I was like, I'll cut my throat first. I'm used to like a stadium where we have the music and the intensity. And so I took out a little tape recorder and said, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna find a building with 40-foot high ceilings. We're gonna build 20-foot high LED screens, 50 feet wide, 180 degrees around me. I'm gonna go to Eric Yuan at Zoom and say, you can't just have 1,000 people. I gotta have 25,000 people so we can interact and bring people up. I'm gonna create a software piece. Many of you already have that software in your phone now, and you just shake it, and that shaking sends a signal here. And the more of you that shake it, the louder it gets. So if it's clapping signs, it starts to clap louder. If it's laughter, it's louder and louder as well. So it's authentic. And then I brought 9 companies together and said, we got to do this. And they said, well, Mr. Robbins, this is an amazing project. It'll take us about 9 months. And I said, no, we have 9 weeks. And they're like, several of them couldn't do it. So we had to let them go and go to somebody else. But we did it in 9 weeks. And now, where I would normally travel around the world, and literally, I found a way to use COVID instead of letting COVID use me. Do you hear me on that? You got to learn to use stress, not let stress use you. And so I said, okay, I've got a different way to reach people. And quite honestly, I didn't know before we did the Stanford study. For sure, I could feel it, I can see you, but it was just as effective or more effective than a normal live in-person event. Only people didn't have to travel, they didn't have to leave their children, they didn't have to pay for a flight, they didn't have to rent a hotel room. So it turned out pretty great. And normally I would travel to 115 cities in a year for multi-day seminars. I go to about 14 to 16 countries. And I lived on the road my entire life. When a crisis comes, if you don't let it destroy you, it'll make you create something new. And when you create something new, you're gonna find it'll be better than what you've done before. What is the number one force, the number one source that causes most people to fail because they don't have enough and other people to succeed? Well, intelligence is extremely important, and I love wickedly smart people. There's a hunger in you, a hunger to grow, a hunger to learn, a hunger to expand, a hunger to get better, a hunger not to settle for less than you can be or do or create or give. And that hunger is what's going to make you succeed. But the source that will make that hunger come to life is energy. Energy is the number one factor between success and failure.